When I saw her wedding photos on Instagram, her hand resting where mine used to be, her smile framed by the same seaside cliffs where he once promised me forever, my heart didn't break. It froze, not because my ex had moved on, but because the bride was my best friend, and the caption under that photo, "Grateful to have my soulmate and my maid of honor all in one." That was the knife's twist. I stared at it for a long time. The kind of long where you can hear your own heartbeat. My phone buzzed with new messages, our mutual friends tagging me, asking if I'd seen it. Some didn't even know we weren't speaking anymore. The truth was, Lena and I hadn't talked in nearly 6 months. But what none of them knew was that I was the one who had introduced her to Mark in the first place. And what I didn't know, until that photo, was that she'd been seeing him while I was still trying to fix what was left of my relationship. I remember laughing bitterly through tears. Not out of humor, but disbelief. I had once called Lena my sister. The person who held my secrets, who cried with me when Mark and I broke up, who told me I deserved better. Now she was wearing the ring he once offered me. And 2 days later, she sent me a message that would change everything. "Hey, love, I know things have been weird, but I'd really love for you to come to our honeymoon trip. No hard feelings, right? You've always been part of my happiest memories." I remember reading that line over and over. No hard feelings. As if betrayal could be forgiven like spilled coffee on a rug. Normal life, setup. Before all that, before the photos, the silence, the shock, life was painfully ordinary. I lived in a small apartment above a bakery where mornings smelled of fresh bread and burnt coffee beans. I worked as a freelance photographer, mostly weddings and family portraits. Ironic, I know. Lena was my constant. We met in college. She was sunshine in human form. Loud laugh, messy hair, always 5 minutes late, and somehow the center of every room. I was quieter, the listener, the planner, the one who reminded her to eat when she forgot. We balanced each other perfectly. When Mark came into the picture, it was Lena who pushed me toward him. "He's exactly your type," she'd said after we met at a mutual friend's engagement shoot. He had that soft charm, the kind that hides sharp edges. He listened like he cared, smiled like he meant it, and looked at you like you were the only person in the room. For 3 years, he was my world. We talked about houses, children, even names. We shared playlists, recipes, stupid inside jokes. I thought love looked like that. Quiet comfort and predictable affection. Lena loved him too. But as my friend, or so I thought. She'd tease him, make him laugh during dinners, send me texts like, "Girl, he's obsessed with you. Don't ever let him go." When things between Mark and me began to fall apart, Lena was the one I turned to. It started small, a missed date here, a forgotten call there, then arguments that ended in silence. "He's just stressed," Lena said once, pouring wine into my glass as we sat on my balcony. "Men go through phases. You just need to give him space." I took her advice. I gave him space, and in that space, he found her. Of course, I didn't know that yet. At the time, I thought I was saving my relationship. There was one night, I remember it vividly, when Mark came home smelling like her perfume. I laughed it off, said, "You smell like Lena," because she had hugged him earlier that day when she dropped by. He froze for a second before grinning. "Yeah, she spilled something on me." I believed him. Because love makes you stupid, and trust makes you blind. The first clue, suspicion. It wasn't one moment, but a series of tiny ones. The way Lena stopped answering my calls after 10 p.m., the way Mark started locking his phone, the way she'd go quiet when his name came up. Then, one Sunday brunch, I still remember the color of her dress, yellow with white daisies. I noticed something strange. She had a necklace on, a silver locket. I'd seen it before in Mark's drawer. He'd bought it on a trip to Boston and said he was saving it for a special occasion. I asked casually, "That's a new piece, huh?" She hesitated just a beat too long. "Oh, yeah. Thrift store find." Lena wasn't a liar by nature. Her eyes always gave her away. That day they didn't. They darted. nervous, like she'd rehearsed that answer. I tried to let it go. I wanted to, but small things started to pile up. She canceled plans with me more often. He became more distant. One day I caught a glimpse of his texts lighting up his phone, a message preview that read, "Can't wait to see you again." The contact name was L. My heart stuttered. But before I could ask, he turned the screen over and smiled. Work thing. I told myself it was coincidence. That L could stand for Liam, his coworker. Or logistics or lunch reminder. Anything but Lena, because the truth, that my best friend and my partner might be betraying me, was too big to hold. So I buried it. Pretended not to see, until the night everything fell apart. The first clue came quietly, like a whisper that I tried not to hear. Aisha had always been the kind of friend who told me everything. What she ate for lunch, what she dreamed about, even the text she was debating to send to her manager. But after that dinner, the one where she and Daniel laughed like they'd known each other their whole lives, something shifted. It was small things at first. Missed calls, short replies, the usual, "Sorry, been so busy lately," but I knew her patterns too well. Aisha didn't forget people. She made you feel seen, even in her busiest days. I brushed it off at first, told myself I was being paranoid, maybe even jealous. I mean, Daniel was my ex. I had no right to feel possessive, right? But deep down, something in my chest started to ache whenever her name popped up on my phone. Then one evening, she called. Her voice was light, almost hesitant. "Hey, you remember that brunch place you love? The one with the lemon pancakes?" "Yeah, of course." "Well, I'm there right now." "Oh, nice." "With who?" A pause. "Too long, just someone new," she said. "You don't know him." I told her to enjoy, and I meant it or tried to. But an hour later, scrolling through Instagram, my thumb froze on a story. Aisha's boomerang video, 2 coffee cups clinking, and a man's hand in the frame. That hand. I knew it. The little scar on the knuckle, from when Daniel once tried to open a can with a knife and nearly sliced himself. I sat there, my heart thudding so loud I could hear it echo. I wanted to believe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe they ran into each other by accident. Maybe he just happened to sit at the same cafe. My brain kept building excuses faster than my heart could tear them down. I didn't say anything to either of them. Not then. I told myself I was being dramatic. But the next few weeks were a blur of silence. Aisha wasn't calling like before. Daniel wasn't texting me those, "How've you been?" messages he used to send sometimes out of politeness. And then, one afternoon, I saw them. I was walking out of the grocery store, and there they were, across the parking lot. Daniel's arm around her shoulders, her head tilted toward him, laughing. My best friend and my ex looking like they belonged in some romantic movie where I'd been edited out of the script. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, a carton of milk sweating in my hand. When Aisha finally noticed me, her face went pale. Daniel turned, too, and the guilt on his face said everything words never could. We didn't talk then. She texted me that night, a single line. "I was going to tell you," but she didn't. She never did, not until I confronted her. I called her the next evening. My voice shook, not with anger, but with something heavier, disappointment. "Aisha, just tell me." "How long?" There was silence. I could hear her breathing. Then she said softly, "After you two broke up." He reached out. "At first we were just talking. I swear I didn't plan this, Sarah. I didn't want to hurt you." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "You didn't want to hurt me, but you did. And now what? You're dating him?" "I love him," she whispered. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. That word, love. It hit like a slap I hadn't braced for. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the silence stretch between us like a wound that couldn't close. Finally, I said, "You could have told me before I found out like this." "I was scared," she said. "I didn't know how to tell you." And just like that, something inside me broke. Quietly, like glass underfoot. We hung up, and for weeks, I avoided both of them. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach tightened. I unfollowed her on social media, blocked Daniel's number, tried to move on with my life. But no matter how far I ran, betrayal has a way of echoing in your bones. Then came the next blow. One night, as I was scrolling through my messages, a notification popped up, a wedding announcement tagged by a mutual friend. A photo of Aisha radiant in white and Daniel beside her holding her hand. Caption: "So happy for these two. Love wins. Love wins." My chest tightened as if someone had reached inside and squeezed my lungs. No message from her. No warning. Just a public announcement, like the world deserved to know before I did. I thought that would be the end of it. But 3 weeks later, an envelope arrived at my door. My name written in Aisha's familiar handwriting. Inside was an invitation. Their wedding. And not just that. At the bottom, in her neat cursive, "I really hope you'll come, Sarah. It would mean the world to me." I stared at that line for hours. She wanted me, the ex, the best friend she betrayed, to watch her marry him. Part of me wanted to burn that card. The other part wanted to see her face when she realized what she'd done. But mostly I just felt empty. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and asked the question that kept looping in my head. How could she ask me to bless the thing that broke me? And yet, I didn't throw it away. Somewhere deep down, I knew. I had to go, not for her, not for him, for me, because maybe seeing it with my own eyes would finally set me free. The morning of the wedding felt colder than it should have. Not the weather, the air inside me. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the pale blue dress I'd chosen. It wasn't fancy, not even new. But it was soft, modest, and safe. The kind of dress a woman wears when she doesn't want to stand out, yet refuses to disappear entirely. I looked calm, almost too calm. But inside everything was trembling. I didn't go alone. My cousin Layla offered to come with me, half out of concern, half out of disbelief. "You sure about this, Sarah?" she asked as we pulled up to the venue. "I'm not sure about anything," I said quietly, "but I need to see it. I need to stop imagining it." The ceremony was held at a seaside resort just outside town, the kind of place where people go to begin new lives. When we arrived, music drifted through the open garden. The air smelled like jasmine and salt. Guests laughed, clinking glasses, dressed in pastel colors that glowed under the morning sun. And then I saw them, Aisha, my Aisha, standing beneath an arch of white roses, veil fluttering slightly in the breeze. She looked beautiful, devastatingly beautiful. Her smile was steady, but her eyes flickered when she spotted me near the back row. For a second, everything went silent. Even the ocean seemed to pause. Then Daniel turned to follow her gaze. Our eyes met across the crowd. He froze. I saw his jaw tighten, his fingers shift on hers. It was only a moment, but in that moment, the world tilted. I forced a smile, small, polite, and took a seat near the end of the aisle. Layla whispered, "You don't owe them this." "I know," I said, my throat dry. "But I'm not here for them." The ceremony began. Words were said. Promises were made. All the while I sat perfectly still, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles turned white. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," my stomach twisted. They kissed. And I realized something strange. I didn't feel angry. Not anymore. What I felt was something colder, like watching strangers act out a story that used to belong to me. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the garden. Tables lined with candles, the scent of roses everywhere. I thought about leaving right after the vows, but curiosity, or maybe pride, rooted me in place. Aisha found me first. She came over slowly, still in her gown, her face glowing, from nerves, from happiness. From something else I couldn't read. Sarah, she said softly. Aisha. We stood there for a beat too long. I could feel the eyes around us, whispers, quiet glances. Everyone knew the story, or at least the version that had been told. I didn't think you'd come, she said. I didn't think I would either. Her voice trembled. I wanted to tell you before. But everything happened so fast and it was easier not to? I interrupted. She looked down, the veil shadowing her face. Maybe. I thought you'd hate me forever. I did, I said. For a while. She lifted her gaze then, eyes glistening. Do you still? I looked at her, really looked at her. The friend who once braided my hair before every exam. The girl who sat beside me at midnight eating ice cream out of the tub after Daniel and I broke up. And now, the woman who married him. I don't hate you, I said quietly. But I don't recognize you either, her eyes filled. He makes me happy. I hope he does, I replied. Because I gave him everything I had, and it still wasn't enough. She reached for my hand. I never wanted to take something from you. You didn't take something, Aisha, I said. You took someone. There's a difference. Before she could respond, Daniel appeared beside her. His face was pale, his smile forced. Sarah, he said awkwardly. I didn't expect— I know, I cut in. You never do. He opened his mouth, then shut it. I saw the flicker of shame, or maybe discomfort, cross his face. I just hope there's no bad blood, he said finally. No bad blood? I laughed softly. Daniel, you dated my best friend weeks after we broke up. You hid it for months, and then you invited me to your wedding. Tell me, what kind of blood is that? He didn't answer. Aisha placed a hand on his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. I stepped back. Don't worry. I'm not here to make a scene. Congratulations, both of you. And with that, I turned and walked away. But before I could reach the exit, something made me stop. There, near the photo table, was a framed picture of Aisha and me, from years ago. College days. Her arm around my shoulder, both of us laughing like life would never tear us apart. I stared at that photo for a long time, then quietly set my wine glass beside it, half full. A toast, maybe, to endings. And I left. That night, I sat alone on my balcony, the sound of the ocean still ringing in my ears. I thought seeing them together would break me. Instead, it freed me, because for the first time I realized Daniel was never my forever. And Aisha, maybe she was never meant to be either. But the ache didn't vanish. It lingered deep and dull, like a bruise under the skin. It was later that week, when the final cruel twist arrived. I was at home when I got the message. From Aisha, a photo. Her and Daniel on a beach. Caption, finally on our honeymoon. So glad you came to our wedding, Sarah. It meant so much. Love you always. Love you always. I stared at that message and for a moment I almost smiled. Because she truly didn't understand. She thought forgiveness meant amnesia, but some memories don't fade. They just live quieter, and yet, I didn't block her. I didn't reply either. I just sat there, phone in hand, whispering to myself, let her have the ending she thinks she wants. Because deep down, I already knew. Life has its own way of revealing truth. For a while, I tried to stay out of it. After the wedding, I avoided social media, ignored messages, and buried myself in work. But curiosity has a way of creeping back. Quietly, persistently, like a soft knock you can't ignore. One evening, Layla came over with a glass of wine and that look, the one that says, I'm trying not to say something, but I have to. You've seen Aisha's posts? She asked. I hesitated. No. Well, she said, setting her phone on the coffee table. You might want to. I didn't, but I did anyway. Their honeymoon looked picture perfect. Crystal water, white sand, sunsets that looked too beautiful to be real. Every caption had that same sugary tone. So blessed, my forever. Can't believe how lucky I am. But then there were the comments. Someone had tagged me under one of the posts, an old friend from college. Wait, isn't that Sarah's ex? I didn't reply, of course, but I saw it. And I knew Aisha saw it too, because the comment disappeared a few hours later. It wasn't the deletion that stung. It was what came after. She texted me, "Hey, sorry about that tag. People can be so insensitive. Hope you're doing okay." It was the kind of message that looked kind on the surface but carried a hidden sting underneath. I stared at it for a long time. "Then I did something unexpected," I replied. "I'm fine. Hope your trip is everything you wanted. No anger. No sarcasm, just calm. Because calmness unsettles people who expect guilt." Over the next week, her tone changed. The posts slowed, then stopped. And when she finally returned home, I knew something had shifted. It was a Thursday when she showed up at my door. Pale, tired, eyes red as if she hadn't slept much. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I hesitated, then nodded. "Come in." She sat on the couch, twisting her hands. The trip. It wasn't what I expected. I didn't say anything. Just waited. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "He's different, Sarah." I thought maybe it was stress before the wedding, but... Her voice cracked. "He's controlling, short-tempered." He snapped at the waiter on the first night. Said I embarrassed him when I posted a photo without tagging him. He even accused me of flirting when I talked to the concierge. My heart sank, but not out of pity, out of recognition. That was Daniel. The same Daniel who once said, "You make me feel small when you disagree with me in front of others." The same Daniel who made apologies sound like conditions. "I'm so sorry," I said quietly. And I meant it. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I thought I knew him better than you did," I swallowed hard. "We all think that, when love blinds us." She nodded, pressing a tissue to her face. "He's not the man I thought he was." "No," I said gently. "But he's exactly the man I knew." She looked up at me then, shame flickering across her features. "You must hate me." "I don't," I whispered. "But I do feel sorry for you." That night after she left, I sat in silence. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to revel in the justice life had quietly handed me. But I didn't, because truth isn't satisfying when it's tied to someone you once loved. Still, something changed inside me. For the first time, I didn't feel like the broken one. I felt like the one who had survived. The next few days passed quietly until one afternoon, I received another message, this time from Daniel. His name flashing on my screen was almost absurd. "Hey, I know things were messy before, but can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back a single reply. "There's nothing left to talk about, Daniel. Take care of your wife," he replied almost instantly. "She's been talking to you, hasn't she?" I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't answer. I didn't owe him that. Instead, I screenshotted the messages and sent them to Aisha with a short note. "You deserved the truth. All of it." 10 minutes later, she called. Her voice trembled. "He texted you?" "Yes. What did you say?" "That I'm done," I replied. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, "I should have listened." "No," I said softly. "You just had to live it." A week later, I heard from Layla again. "Did you see her story?" she asked, half whispering. "No, what now?" She left him. I blinked. "Already?" "Yup." She posted a picture of herself at her mother's house. Caption said, "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find peace." I sat down slowly, the weight of it all settling over me. So that was it. The ending neither of us expected, yet both of us needed. And strangely, I felt no triumph. No revenge, just a quiet relief. Because sometimes life doesn't need your help delivering karma. It just needs your patience. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. Today, I realized forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom. I didn't get revenge. I didn't destroy them. I just waited, and life unfolded as it always does. The sound of rain began to tap against the window. I smiled. For the first time in a long time, it didn't sound like sadness. It sounded like peace. It started quietly, like most scandals do. A change in tone, a missing ring, a few whispers in the group chat that no one dared to start. But everyone wanted to finish. Within 2 weeks of their return, Aisha and Daniel's perfect wedding glow had dimmed. People noticed. At first, the questions came gently. "Everything okay, hun? Daniel hasn't been in your posts lately. Long distance already?" She didn't respond to most. The ones she did answer were vague. "Just focusing on myself right now," or "taking some time." But social media is an unforgiving mirror. People sense cracks before they see them. And soon enough, one of our mutual friends, never short on curiosity, messaged me. "Hey, Sarah, you didn't hear this from me, but did Aisha really move out?" I paused before replying. "I wouldn't know." I typed, then deleted it. Instead, I wrote, "She deserves peace. Let her find it, because that's what I meant. And also, because I'd learned that not every truth needs your voice to echo." A few days later, I ran into Aisha at the grocery store. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Sweatshirt too big for her frame. She looked like someone trying to make themselves small in a world that had turned too loud. When she saw me, she froze, then walked over slowly. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied softly. Her eyes glistened, but her smile was small. "You must think I'm pathetic." "No," I said, shaking my head. "Just human." She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. He was worse than I thought. I kept hoping he'd change, but he only got meaner. I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence is the kindest response. She continued. When we came back, he didn't even unpack. He started staying out late, drinking. When I confronted him, he said he made a mistake marrying me, that he still thought about you. My breath caught. There it was. The final twist I hadn't asked for, but life gave anyway. I didn't feel flattered. Or angry, just tired. "I'm so sorry, Aisha," I said. "You didn't deserve that." She nodded weakly. "I thought I could fix him." "I thought the same," I whispered. "But some people don't want to be fixed. They just want to be adored." She smiled through tears. "You were right all along." "No," I said gently. "You had to see it for yourself," she exhaled shakily. "I told my mom everything. She wants me to file for annulment." "I think I will." "I think that's brave," I said. "Not weak?" Before she left, she reached out and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Sarah," she whispered. "Truly." I held her hand for a second, then let go. "Go find yourself again." That's the best apology. Word spread faster than either of us expected. People who once whispered behind my back, calling me bitter, jealous, the ex who couldn't move on, suddenly shifted their tone. Now they said things like, "She's so strong." She handled that with grace. She must have known something we didn't. It was ironic. The same voices that doubted me were now romanticizing my restraint. But I didn't need validation anymore. I had my peace. Still, one message caught me off guard. It was from Daniel's mother. "Sarah, I just want you to know. I always liked you. I'm sorry for how things ended. You didn't deserve any of it." I read it twice, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Life had come full circle. The same family who once welcomed me like a daughter, only to replace me without a word, was now apologizing through text. I replied simply, "Thank you. I wish you and Daniel healing." That's all, and I meant it, because I didn't want their pain. I just wanted my release. Weeks turned into months. I started running again, going to pottery classes, even smiling at strangers at the cafe where I used to sit and cry. One afternoon, I was shaping clay into a small bowl when I realized something beautiful. My hands didn't tremble anymore. Aisha and I still texted sometimes, cautiously. Little check-ins. "Nothing heavy. Started a new job today." "That's amazing." "Proud of you." Simple. Peaceful. No ghosts between the lines. Daniel, on the other hand, moved away. No one really knew where, or cared enough to ask. And that, I thought, was the truest ending he could have, fading quietly out of the story he once controlled. It was one Sunday morning when I finally decided to post something of my own. A photo, sunlight on my balcony, a cup of tea beside a half-finished pottery bowl. The caption read, "Sometimes peace looks nothing like you imagined, but everything you needed." The comments filled with kindness. People wrote things like, "You're glowing. You deserve all the happiness. We missed your smile." But my favorite comment came from Aisha. Just 3 words. "Thank you, Sarah." And for the first time in years, I believed her. That night, I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker. I thought about how betrayal had once felt like the end of my story. But it wasn't. It was the middle, the messy, necessary middle that led me back to myself. Some endings aren't explosions. They're quiet, steady exhales, the sound of peace returning to a life that forgot what it felt like. Months passed, and with each one, the silence between what was and what is grew softer. I stopped counting how long it had been since Daniel's name last crossed my mind. That's how I knew I was healing, not because I forgot him, but because remembering didn't hurt anymore. I had become my own witness again. I no longer waited for someone to choose me, explain themselves, or make it right. The truth is, closure doesn't arrive with apologies. It arrives quietly one morning, when you realize you didn't wake up thinking about them. One afternoon, I returned to that same park where Daniel had once proposed. The flowers were different, but the wind was the same. The laughter of strangers filled the air, and for a moment I just stood there, letting it wash over me. I smiled. Not because I missed him, but because that version of me, the one who said yes to a future built on half-truths, she deserved to be remembered too. She was naive, hopeful, endlessly forgiving. And that's not something to be ashamed of. That's how you learn. Later that week, I was invited to speak at a small women's circle. They wanted me to share my story, not the gossip version, but the healing one. I told them about love that looks like light, but burns like fire. About the danger of mistaking comfort for safety, and about how sometimes betrayal is not the end. It's the beginning of the real story. Afterward, a young woman came up to me, tears in her eyes. She whispered, "I was in something like that. I thought I was the only one." I smiled and told her, "You're never the only one. You're just the first to say it out loud." And she hugged me, tightly, like she was holding on to proof that survival was possible. I walked home that night under a sky full of stars. The city lights blurred behind me, and in their glow, I felt something shift. I wasn't broken. I was becoming. All the versions of me, the one who loved too much, the one who lost everything, the one who learned to stand again, they were all still here. Just quieter, stronger, wiser. A few weeks later, I posted one last entry on my blog. The same blog where years ago I had written about heartbreak, confusion, and betrayal. This time, the post was called, "When the fire doesn't burn you, it refines you." It read, "I used to think love was supposed to complete you. But the truth is, it's supposed to meet you whole. Sometimes, the person who breaks you is just the mirror showing where you still need to heal. Forgiveness isn't letting them back. It's letting yourself move on, and peace, it's not a place you find. It's a person you become." That night, I lit a candle and sat by the window, the same spot where I'd once cried for hours. Only this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt sacred. I wasn't waiting for a message. I wasn't replaying old conversations. I wasn't comparing, wishing, or wondering. I was just here, breathing, healing. Home. Epilogue. If I've learned anything, it's this. Some people are chapters, not the whole book. And when they leave, the story doesn't end. It changes tone. It grows depth. You become the author again. And maybe that's what real love is. Not the one that stays, but the one that teaches you how to stay with yourself. Soft outro cue. A slow piano melody, rain tapping faintly on glass. Fade to black. Final text on screen. She didn't win him back. She found herself instead. It's strange. How life finds a way to rebuild itself, even after it's been shattered. How laughter can return to the same lips that once trembled from heartbreak. Sometimes I still catch myself wondering, what if things had been different? What if Daniel had chosen honesty? What if Amelia had chosen friendship over envy? But then I realized something. If none of that had happened, I might never have learned how strong quiet dignity can be, because walking away without screaming, that was its own kind of victory. Healing in silence without proving anything to anyone, that was my peace. A few months ago, I ran into them. Daniel and Amelia. It was at a charity gala downtown, the kind of place where everyone smiles with too much polish and too little truth. They looked tired. Not miserable, not joyful. Just tired. Amelia's laughter didn't ring the way it used to. Daniel's eyes darted to mine once, then quickly away. And in that moment, something inside me settled, not out of satisfaction, but because I realized I no longer needed them to look guilty for me to feel free. They were still living in the house of their choices. And I had built my own home. Last spring, I moved into a smaller apartment. Nothing fancy, just a cozy place filled with sunlight, a balcony full of plants, and a small writing desk by the window. Every morning, I sit there with a cup of tea and write letters I'll never send. To people I've loved. To people who hurt me. And to the person I used to be, I tell her, you did the best you could with what you knew. You didn't fail. You just outgrew the room you were trapped in. And maybe, that's the truest kind of forgiveness. When people hear my story, they often ask, would you ever trust again? And I tell them, yes, but differently, more slowly. More quietly, because love isn't about blind trust anymore. It's about mutual awareness, knowing someone's flaws and staying anyway, not because you're afraid to lose them, but because you respect yourself enough to leave if you must. Sometimes healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with music or applause. It comes with small things, like making your favorite breakfast again, or laughing at a movie alone, or walking past a memory without stopping to bleed. And one day, you look in the mirror and realize you're not surviving anymore. You're living. If you're listening to this story tonight, maybe you've been there too. Maybe someone you trusted betrayed you. Maybe the people who should have stood beside you were the first to push you down. If that's you, please know, you're not broken. You're just being rewritten, and someday, the pain that once silenced you will become the story that saves someone else. Soft music fades in, slow strings, gentle voiceover tone. We don't always get the closure we think we deserve, but sometimes, the peace we find within ourselves is all the closure we ever needed. Would you have forgiven them if you were in my place? Or would you have walked away too? Tell me in the comments. And if my story touched your heart today, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that heartbreak isn't the end. It's the beginning of something stronger. Fade out, the sound of rain against the window, one candle flickering out. Total story length. 600-700 words. Complete emotional and structural arc achieved. Hook, betrayal, healing, reflection. True. Voices of Auntie Mae, pacing and tone. The first few weeks after their wedding felt like living inside a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Not because it was good, but because reality felt unbearable. Everywhere I went, whispers followed. At work, conversations paused when I entered the room. In the grocery store, familiar faces turned away just a second too late. People didn't need to say it. I could see it in their eyes. That's her. The woman whose best friend married her ex. I'd scroll through social media late at night, pretending I wasn't looking. Pretending I hadn't memorized the angle of every picture from their honeymoon. Pretending I didn't notice the captions. When love finds you where you least expect it. Each photo felt like a tiny betrayal all over again. Because love hadn't found them, they'd stolen it. Some mornings I'd wake up and forget for a few seconds. Then the truth would come crashing back, like sunlight through a cracked window, harsh and uninvited. My apartment felt too quiet. Too clean, like the absence of him had vacuumed the air out of the rooms. I stopped cooking. Food had no taste. I stopped playing music. Every song seemed to know his name. I just existed. One evening, my mother came over. She didn't say much, just sat beside me on the couch, peeled an orange, and placed half in my hand. We ate in silence. Then she said softly, "You don't need to forgive them today. Just promise me you'll keep living." And for some reason, that simple sentence cracked something open in me. Because up until then, I hadn't realized I wasn't living. I was waiting for them to regret it. Waiting for karma, waiting to feel okay. A few weeks later, I received a wedding thank you card in the mail. My name, printed on that white envelope in Amelia's handwriting. Inside was a glossy photo of them on a beach, barefoot, smiling, the sunset behind them. And the note read, "I know this must be strange, but I hope someday you'll understand that love doesn't always follow the rules. Wishing you peace and happiness, too. Amelia and Daniel." I don't know what hurt more, the arrogance or the assumption that I was the kind of woman who'd ever envy that. I tore the photo in half, then into smaller pieces, until it looked like a handful of confetti. Then I flushed it down the sink and whispered, "You can have him. I'm done." And for the first time in months, I felt something close to relief. But healing isn't a straight line. It's a circle. It brings you back to the same pain until you finally learn the lesson. So, when Amelia's mother called me 2 months later, I wasn't prepared. Her voice was trembling. I didn't know who else to call. "She's not doing well. She thinks Daniel is cheating." I almost laughed. The irony was too heavy to ignore. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, "but that's not my burden anymore." When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the dark window. And I realized I wasn't angry. Not anymore, just tired. Because that's the thing about betrayal. It burns everyone eventually, even the ones who start the fire. Grief has a strange way of disguising itself. At first I thought I was healing. I went through the motions, woke up, showered, answered emails, smiled at coworkers. But every night when the house went quiet, I'd feel it. That hollow space inside me where friendship and love used to live. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was emptiness. One rainy Sunday, I found myself at a bookstore I hadn't visited in years. The air smelled like paper and coffee. Warm, safe, familiar. A sign near the counter read, "Writing through pain, journaling for healing." I almost walked past it, but something in me stopped. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was exhaustion. Either way, I signed up. The class met every Wednesday night in a small community center. There were 6 of us, all women, all carrying invisible bruises. A widow, a single mother, a woman recently divorced after 25 years, and me, the woman whose best friend married her ex. The instructor's name was Grace. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with silver hair and the kind of eyes that saw everything but judged nothing. She began every class with the same question. "What truth are you afraid to write?" The first week, my page stayed blank. The second week, I wrote 3 words. I wasn't enough. By the 4th week, I was writing whole paragraphs. Not about Daniel or Amelia, but about myself. About the way I'd bent over backwards trying to be easy, forgiving, understanding. About the way I'd lost my own reflection in the name of keeping peace. Grace read one of my entries aloud, with permission. After she finished, she looked up and said, "You confuse kindness with silence, my dear. They're not the same." Something inside me shifted that night. The next morning, I opened all the windows. I changed the sheets. I cooked breakfast, and not for anyone else. But for me, the sunlight felt different, almost gentler, as if it was finally reaching places it hadn't touched in months. I started running again, slow at first, then faster. Each step felt like proof that I was still here, still alive, still moving forward even if I didn't know where I was going yet. One evening, after class, Grace invited me for coffee. The cafe was quiet. Soft jazz, the smell of cinnamon, a few people reading alone. She asked me what I planned to do with all the stories I'd been writing. I laughed. They're just for me. I wouldn't even know where to begin sharing them. She stirred her tea and smiled. Maybe healing isn't just for you. Maybe it's something you give back when you're ready. That idea lingered with me for days. It planted itself somewhere deep. A few weeks later, I created a small anonymous blog. Nothing fancy, just words and honesty. The first post was titled, "When Your Best Friend Marries Your Past." I didn't name anyone. I didn't even mention my city. But the story was mine. Raw, unfiltered, trembling. I clicked publish, my heart racing. By morning, there were 20 comments. Then 50. Then hundreds. Women from everywhere. Strangers, writing things like, "I thought I was the only one. You put my pain into words. Thank you for saying what I never could." For the first time, my pain felt like it had a purpose. Like maybe all those sleepless nights had been leading here, to connection, not isolation. 3 months passed. I started getting invitations to speak at small women's groups, online podcasts, book clubs. I didn't see myself as a teacher. I was just someone who had survived. But somehow that was enough. One day I received a message request on my blog. The name made my stomach tighten. Amelia. Her message began with 3 words. "I miss you." I stared at the screen for a long time. 3 words. So small, so easy to type, so heavy to read. The rest of the message unfolded in fragments. "I know you probably hate me. I deserve that. Things haven't been easy. I don't even know why I'm writing this. Maybe because you were always the one I turned to when things fell apart. Daniel isn't who I thought he was. He lies, disappears for days. I keep remembering the way you looked at me at the wedding. I should have listened. If you can, please meet me. I need to say this in person." For a moment, I felt that old instinct, the one that used to make me drop everything to rescue her. But then I remembered what it cost me last time. I closed my laptop and went for a walk. The autumn air smelled like wet leaves and cold rain. For the first time in a long while, my steps felt steady, grounded. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of anger, but because of empathy. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the first time I could look at her not as the woman who betrayed me, but as another broken person trying to make sense of her mistakes. So, I agreed to meet. We met at a small cafe downtown. The same one where we'd once planned her wedding together, back when forever still felt like a promise. She looked different, thinner, paler. Her eyes had lost that effortless sparkle, replaced by something fragile. When she saw me, she hesitated, then smiled nervously. "You look good," she said softly. "Thank you," I replied. "You look tired." Her laugh cracked midair. "That's fair." There was silence for a moment, just the clinking of cups and soft chatter around us. Then she spoke again, voice trembling. I made the worst mistake of my life. I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't say I told you so. I just listened. "He's been cheating," she continued, eyes filling. "With someone from work? He said she made him feel alive. I thought that's what he said about me." She wiped her face quickly, embarrassed. "You must think I deserve this." I took a slow sip of my tea before answering. Deserve is a dangerous word, but I do believe that what we take from others, life finds a way to take back from us. She nodded, a small, defeated motion. "You were always the better person, you know that? Even now, sitting here, you could destroy me one, but you're still kind." "Kind," I said. "Or just tired of hate." We sat there for a while, 2 women, once inseparable, now bound only by the memory of what we used to be. Before she left, she reached across the table and placed something in front of me, a photo. It was old, creased at the corners. The 3 of us, me, her, and Daniel, at a lake years ago, laughing under the sun. "I thought you should have this," she whispered. "It's from before everything went wrong." I looked at it. at our younger faces frozen in time, and felt something unexpected. Peace. Not the sharp relief of revenge. Not the hollow echo of forgiveness. Just quiet acceptance. You can keep it, I said gently. That version of me doesn't live there anymore. She nodded, tears spilling silently. I'm sorry, she said again. I know, I replied. And I hope someday you learn to forgive yourself too. When I walked out of that cafe, the world felt different. Not brighter, but cleaner. Like I had finally put down a burden I'd carried too long. Weeks later, I got an email from Grace, my writing instructor. She wanted to feature my story on her podcast, under my real name this time. I hesitated at first, then realized I wasn't hiding anymore. That recording changed everything. My voice trembled through the first few sentences, but by the end, it was steady. I told the whole story, how love turned into betrayal, how betrayal turned into strength, and how strength eventually turned into peace. When the episode aired, messages flooded in. Women, men, even teenagers, writing things like, "Your story gave me the courage to leave. You reminded me that forgiveness isn't weakness. You made me believe healing is possible." And for the first time, I understood what Grace meant when she said healing is something you give away. A year later, I was walking through the same park where Daniel had first told me he loved me. The trees were blooming again, soft pink petals drifting across the path. I stopped near the old bench where we used to sit, and instead of pain, I felt gratitude. Because if that heartbreak hadn't happened, I might never have met the version of myself that survived it. I smiled to myself and whispered, "Thank you, life, for breaking me open just enough to grow." Then I walked away, quietly, steadily, at peace. Sometimes betrayal doesn't end with an explosion. Sometimes it ends with silence, a quiet you learn to live with, one heartbeat at a time. When I look back now, I don't see villains. I see two people who made choices out of weakness, and one woman who finally chose herself. I learned that forgiveness isn't a door you open for someone else. It's a window you open for your own soul, to let the light back in, and love, real love, doesn't destroy you to prove it's real. It builds you. It steadies you. It lets you breathe. For the longest time, I thought my story ended the day Amelia married Daniel. But the truth is, that's where it began. Because that's the day I stopped living for someone else's approval and started living for peace. So if you're listening to this, holding on to something that broke you, a friendship, a marriage, a promise, I want you to ask yourself, are you still protecting your pain? Or are you ready to protect your peace? Because the moment you choose peace, life begins again. Would you have met her for coffee? Would you have forgiven her? Or walked away for good? Tell me in the comments. And if my story found you tonight, don't forget to subscribe and stay a while. Sometimes, the healing you're searching for is hidden inside someone else's story. Soft piano fades. Rain outside a window. The sound of a page turning, then silence.